In today's video, I thought I'd just do a little quick one with a couple of tips I think might help anybody else that is making comics. As you know, I make a comic called Doomsayer. If you don't know, now you know. And you can read that on my website. I am in the process of trying to put together some kind of physical copies. I'm waiting on my prototype. I've already ordered it, so I don't know. Stay tuned on that. I thought it might be a good idea to put together a little quick tip list for y'all that want to make comics, just to kind of give you an idea of all the most important things that I learned in the process of making Doomsayer. I guess maybe you could say this is more like manga tips instead of comic tips, because I feel like the word comics has a negative connotation based off of the state of the Western comic industry. I'm not gonna get into the politics. Ridiculous, man. Plus all that interconnected universe bullshit. It's all superheroes all the time. Like, come on, man. Comics could have been so much more. Oh, hey man, Batman's pretty cool. Yeah? You want to read Batman? Okay. Yeah, you got a little guide for me? Okay, but if you want to read Batman, you gotta read Wonder Woman, Superman, and Dog Welder. Who the f wants to read Dog Welder? Other than that, let's just get into the first tip. Number 1, take your time. Seriously, take your time. I'm assuming if you're watching this, you're probably an independent comic creator and don't have to meet deadlines, right? If you want to just start your own thing and put it out there like on Webtoon, Tapas, or your own website, if, you know, it doesn't meet the guidelines. I had my comic on Tapas for a little bit, but it got removed specifically for pubic hair. Because there was some nudity, right? And like, it's set in the Middle Ages, and you know, there wasn't the shaving technology there is today. Anyway, I digress, but I'd say take your time, really put together something good, you know? Work on your craft, focus on your artwork, you know, try to get as good as possible. Take your time with each chapter. Don't rush things, alright? You don't have to rush things if you're being an independent comic creator. Now, if you're like working for Marvel or DC, well, I'm sorry. But also, you know, you got deadlines to meet. I kind of understand if you gotta rush things a little bit, but for the most part, if you're just doing an independent thing on your own, that's your own personal side project kind of thing, take your time, alright? Don't rush things. You look at something like Berserk. I know, dead horse, but I love Berserk. It's like my favorite ever. You know, Miura took his time. Sometimes, some people might say he took too much of his time. Tip numero dos. Layout must be legible. I'm going to show you a little something here. It's side by side, a little comparison, because I did a bit of a redraw or a touch-up before I went and sent Doomsayer off to the printer to get that prototype made. We got this older version of the page and this newer version of the page. In this scene, there's a lot of dialogue going on. It's kind of a pain to read because it's just like a straight wall of text. Now, you don't really want to do that. You kind of want to break it up. Alright, so there's this technique that I picked up a while back. It's sort of like snaking is the way I refer to it, if that's the appropriate term. But basically, you kind of want to read sort of in a snake-like pattern, depending if you're doing a standard Western style layout or if you're gonna go and be weird and make a manga style layout. Even though this is an English-speaking video and like I'm American and this is gonna be targeting a Western audience, but you know, for some reason you just want to lay everything out right to left because you're so into manga, but that doesn't make any sense because you're American. English reads left to right. What are you doing? That a little aside, make sure it's not just chunky walls of text. You're making a comic, not a book, right? So break it up a little bit, kind of put it into like little bubbles like I did here. That kind of helps, like sort of sort it out, you know what I mean? Make it legible, okay? You don't want a mess. Messes are bad, alright? That's too much to clean up. On the topic of layout, let's talk about the mood of the scene, alright? Usually when there's like an action scene in my comic, or some kind of like horror scene, because there's a little bit of element of horror in it, because the dark fantasy, so, you know, gotta get some spooky boys in there. I usually try to go for a more radical layout. Radical. Yeah, like the 90s, almost, sort of like with these angled, rough panels going on. Like, I'll put an example here, if I can find something that's not too gory or graphic. I sort of get these panels that are a little bit more extreme, and I sort of like, you know, get the layout just kind of rougher looking, rather than the more standard, just like boxes or for panels, you know what I mean? Just kind of get the energy flowing, and I usually have like a black background in it, too. Just to kind of help sell it. But then again, I am working in grayscale, sort of manga style, but, you know, laid out American way. So I think your layout should be reflective of the moon, because shapes have different energy to them, you know what I mean? Like circles are softer and rounder, squares got harsher edges. You start getting all sort of angular shapes. Now you got like a little bit more sinister presence going on. So that's one little tip I would add about the layout. Tip number 3 was uneven. Tip number 3, framing, or camera angles, for lack of a better word. The thing about comics is that they're basically movies that don't move. So this could be kind of interesting because you can move the camera in really unique ways that you can't really do live action. Like, you know, you can put the camera like right here, or like right up in someone's face or whatever. You don't want everything in 3/4 view because that gets really boring and redundant, and it shows that you don't have any artistic prowess. I mean, you can, you know, I think that's pretty good for like comedy comics, you know what I mean? But like if you're doing something like dark fantasy like I am, you really want to move that camera around, get unique angles. But you should also consider the characters and the scene that's playing out. Like a wide shot is probably better for like a war scene, if that's what you're doing. And also like, you know, close-ups a little bit more for, you know, just more character interactions, you know, get like more detailed facial expressions. Now there's this one scene in my comic that I think is a pretty good example. So at a certain point, the queen, right? Queen Celeste VII wants to go out on a search party to go collect somebody of importance. I don't want to spoil it. But then Captain Williams, you know, the captain of the Mage Blood Brigade, these words don't make sense if you didn't read the comic, but basically he says like, wait, hold on, you're the queen. Why are you gonna go? Let me do it. But then she puts him in his place, right? And it sort of moves the camera to put her in the superior position and basically diminishes Captain Williams. So always consider how you're gonna shoot things, or the composition rather, right? So make sure you move that camera around. Don't make it boring. Number 4, body language. One of the most underrated tools in visual storytelling. Now, body language is something that I think a lot of artists overlook, especially comic artists, like newer. The way characters react to certain scenes are reflective of their personalities, of their character, and I think it's important to note that through their body language. Now, if I sat like this, you would probably think like, oh, is he depressed or is he pissed off about something, right? You know, obviously a facial expression would help. Now I'm a sad boy. Look at me, I'm a sad boy. Now if I sat like this, you'd probably think I'm a smug piece of shit, right? I usually just sit normal, you know what I mean? Can't show too much knee on YouTube, you know? I made the mistake of wearing shorts today.
Cover your knees up if you're gonna be walking around everywhere.
Anyway, when you're writing out a scene and you're doing thumbnails, you should always do thumbnails before you go ahead and draw the pages. You should consider how the characters are reacting in the scene. For example, there is the first scene with my characters Anna and Emma, where Anna's running from her life from this weird cult that will be revealed eventually, you know, probably in volume 2. And, right, she's terrified, right? She's got really defensive body language. She bumps into Emma, who's a confident bounty hunter who helps her escape, right? She just moves, right? She doesn't think about anything. She's like, all right, this girl's in danger, let me help her, right? Really confident body language. Well, Anna's sort of like more tighter, you know what I mean? More tense. So body language really helps the visual storytelling. You could probably remove the bubbles and still kind of get the message across. And the last tip, and the most important, is to be true to yourself, okay? Write the stories that you want to read, okay? You know what I mean? If you want to write lesbian brothels, write it. It's a pretty good manga, by the way. Actually surprisingly wholesome. Just don't care what other people think, you know? Well, I mean do, but don't, in a way. Something fell. Those books cared what I thought. Yeah, but do, but don't at the same time. So like, don't be afraid to put yourself out there, you know? I'm gonna put this video out there and maybe some people are gonna say like, oh my god, you suck, you should quit YouTube yourself. But that's alright. I don't really care about the negative criticism like that. Now you gotta find a balance between hate and criticism, because there might be people that give legitimate critique, but then there are people that are just assholes. You gotta be able to find the difference, okay? Again, like I said, just make the comics that you want to read. That's the most important thing. And just one bonus tip, Spellcheck. Run your stuff through a spell check, okay? And read it back and check your grammar. This has been John. It's been real. Check out the Patreon. $1 a month now instead of $2. $1. Check out my website. Read my comic. So on and so forth. Thank you very much. Last video did surprisingly well. I think I might do a couple more fan arts because that did really good. And yeah, I'm gonna turn these lights off because I'm sweating. I'll see you next time.